Somewhere around 500 BCE, practitioners in India started holding their fingers in precise shapes during meditation. Around the same time, Buddhist traditions in Tibet and Japan were doing the same thing, completely independently, with no shared text, no common teacher. They all landed on the same idea, that the position of your hands could change what was happening inside your body. You could write that off as coincidence, or you could ask what they were all noticing. Because here's what's interesting. Modern neuroscience has spent the last few decades mapping exactly how the brain and the hand are connected. And what that research shows is not mystical, it's mechanical. The question this video is asking is a simple one. What if those ancient traditions weren't inventing something new, but finding something that was already built into the hardware? No belief required, just biology. Act 1. Your hands take up an absurd amount of your brain. There's a classic image in neuroscience called the cortical homunculus. It's a diagram of the human body, but drawn to reflect how much brain space each body part actually gets. Your hands come out enormous, fingers bigger than your entire torso, lips and tongue swollen out of proportion, your back, your legs, your arms, all shrunken down to almost nothing. It looks absurd, but that's the point. Your brain is not treating your body equally. It's investing its processing power where it matters most, and your hands are where it's spending the majority of the budget. Part of why is density. The fingertip has roughly 4 times more mechanoreceptors than the palm of your hand. These are the sensory cells that respond to pressure, texture, and contact. At the fingertip, they are packed in at around 240 units. That makes the fingertip one of the highest resolution sensory surfaces on your entire body, denser than almost anywhere else on your skin. What that means is every time you press 2 fingers together, you're not just touching yourself. You're firing a dense burst of signals into one of the most cortically connected regions of your nervous system. But here's where it gets more interesting than just the hands have lots of nerves. Recent neuroimaging work has identified something called the somatocognitive action network. What researchers found is that the hand zones in the motor cortex don't sit in isolation. They alternate with regions tied to physiological control, arousal regulation, and internal organ function, including connections that reach all the way down to the adrenal medulla. The same cortical neighborhood that's handling your finger movements is trading information with the systems that regulate how activated or calm you are at any given moment. So the hands aren't just output devices sending commands out to the world, they're input channels with a direct line into the systems that control your internal state. That's the architecture that makes everything else in this video possible. Act 2. What holding a shape actually does. So given that setup, what actually happens when you deliberately hold a specific hand shape and stay there? The first thing worth knowing is that static hand postures change your brain's electrical activity. When the hand is constrained, research shows increased beta power in frontal regions. Beta activity in that context is associated with what you might call a braked state, a kind of inhibitory signal that slows down the excitatory chatter in the sensory-motor system. Holding still, it turns out, is not neurologically neutral. It's actively doing something. Then, there's what happens at the point of contact between specific fingers. When one finger touches another, the brain's response is highly specific to which finger it is. Touch the index finger, and you see modulation in the cortical population that maps to the index finger. Touch the ring finger, and a different population responds. This isn't a generic hand is being touched signal. The brain is reading the exact configuration with precision, and it's adjusting motor cortex excitability finger by finger. Now add more fingers into contact at once, and something unexpected happens. The response isn't just additive. Stimulating all 5 fingers together produces a stronger decrease in corticospinal excitability than you'd predict by adding up each finger's individual effect. The brain is integrating multi-finger contact as a pattern, something qualitatively different from any single point of touch. The thumb is its own category entirely. EEG studies looking at how the brain processes tactile input show that thumb stimulation produces a distinct response compared to the other digits, tied to the thumb's unique role in grasping and precision control. When ancient practitioners built gestures around the thumb touching specific fingers, they were, whether they knew it or not, working with the digit the brain treats as most categorically significant. And the autonomic system is listening too. Fingertip tactile stimulation can suppress sympathetic nerve activity and push the system toward parasympathetic dominance. One study found that fingertip vibration timed to breathing decreased heart rate and increased heart rate variability, which is a marker of how flexibly the heart is responding to moment-to-moment demands. That shift is not trivial. It's the nervous system moving out of alert mode. The circuit breaker framing earns its name here. Holding a specific shape with intention appears to interrupt the default excitatory loop in the motor cortex, pushing it toward a more regulated, inhibited state, not shut down. Regulated, the difference between a revving engine and one running at idle. But there's a layer on top of all this biology, and it's the part that makes mudras more than just finger yoga. Act 3. Why the ritual part isn't noise. Here's something that comes up in ritual research that most people don't expect. When scientists take a completely invented ritual, one with no cultural history, no spiritual meaning, no tradition behind it at all, and teach it to participants before a stressful task, anxiety drops. Heart rate comes down, performance improves. The ritual doesn't need to be ancient or meaningful to anyone else. It just needs to be structured, repeated, and feel intentional to the person doing it. That's not a small finding. It tells you the brain isn't responding to the content of the ritual. It's responding to the predictability of it. The mechanism seems to run through the prefrontal cortex. Organizing and executing a structured sequence of actions engages the prefrontal cortex, and that engagement appears to put a brake on amygdala reactivity. Predictable behavior creates a kind of internal safety signal. You're telling your nervous system, this is known territory. Nothing is about to go wrong. The amygdala quiets down because there's no ambiguity to resolve. One study on deliberate, embodied gesture training found a 33% reduction in self-reported anxiety alongside measurable changes in frontal brain activity associated with emotion regulation. The participants weren't doing anything mystical. They were just moving their hands with intention and attention, repeatedly, over time. That last part matters, over time, because there's a conditioning angle here that explains why mudra traditions have always insisted on sustained practice. When you repeatedly pair a specific hand shape with a calm mental state, the gesture starts to function as a conditioned cue. The brain learns that this configuration predicts this state. Eventually, forming the shape alone begins to pull toward that state, the same way a familiar smell pulls toward a memory. The hand position becomes a shortcut, not because of anything intrinsic to the fingers, but because the association has been built and reinforced enough times to become automatic. This is why traditional mudra practice emphasizes holding postures for 15 to 20 minutes with focused breathing, rather than flicking through shapes like channels on a TV. The duration isn't ceremonial padding. It's the minimum viable dose for building the association. Without the repetition and the attention, you're just holding your fingers in a shape. It's worth being honest about the limits of what the research can actually tell us. Direct mudra studies are thin. Most trials bundle hand gestures together with pranayama, posture, and meditation. So pulling out the isolated contribution of the hand position is genuinely difficult. The field hasn't done that experiment cleanly yet. What the evidence does support is this. The biological machinery is real. The autonomic pathways are real. And the ritual layer adds a conditioning mechanism on top of what the physiology alone starts. Each layer amplifies the one beneath it. The hand position creates a signal. The intention sharpens it. The repetition locks it in. The mechanoreceptors don't care what you believe. They fire when pressed. The motor cortex responds. The autonomic system shifts. That process was running long before anyone named it. Mudras didn't build a new pathway into the nervous system. They found one that was already there and figured out how to use it deliberately. Whether you call that ritual or neuroscience, the hardware is the same. If you want more videos that take practices like this seriously and look at what's actually underneath them, subscribe. There's a lot more to get into.